Washington has a bunch of exciting returners in 2025.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. First, Lars, before we get into anything, give a shout out to you and everybody else out there who might have been affected by some of the power outages in the Seattle area after the bomb cyclone. It's cold. Stay warm out there. You do the same, and you're a trooper for this one, doing it from your car. We got so much fun stuff that we're going to talk about today. Got UW basketball. It still has a long way to go. Danny Sprinkle has been very blunt about that. You love to hear that. Can Washington build on the recruiting success we've seen in 2025 in 2026? We're going to get there as well, but we got to talk about some of these promising building blocks that we're going to watch play out for the majority of the next two games. Really, that's all it is. But for the next two games for Washington season and moving forward, because Washington is in a really great place to succeed in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, it's the antithesis of what you had this season, where you had, two returning starters? I mean, I remember going back and forth with a couple of us, in fall camp. It's like, well, Cam Fab, yes. EJ, yes. Like, who actually started all 12 games? Maybe actually one, maybe two.
Tuputala being the other one, yeah.
Oh, right, that was the other one, right. And it's like, okay, now you're going to have one returning at the position in Khmori, but likely you're going to have Jonah, and then you have Denzel, and then you possibly have Quentin Moore, and at least 3/5 of the offensive line as a party at right tackle, pick one at left tackle, guard could come back. There's so many pieces just on both sides of the ball. And that's why we're so optimistic for next season is you're not going into it saying, oh, well, there's a lot of inexperience. It's like maybe a little bit of inexperience, but the key positions, quarterback, tackle, line, running back, receiver, all the pieces that weren't there this season are now going to be there in 2025. And, who knows what they had in the portal and things like that and how some of the freshmen come about. But that's also even more to the point where if you do end up playing ZRS and some of these other guys, that's just a bonus. It's like you have the core coming back. Cam Broussard can come back. EP's coming back. Again, not public. We're probably assuming these guys are coming back. There's no reason why they wouldn't, it seems like. And so
it's the same thing with Jonah Coleman in that same light, yeah. And sorry, Lars, there are a couple guys in there, because I want to let you keep going there, that I know you didn't omit them by any way, on purpose by any means, but Decker DeGraaf, Khmori House. There are so many names in this. Javon Parker, hopefully, if he's healthy, that's another big one. The edge rushers room. It's the same thing. You look at it where it's, hey, maybe some of these guys aren't full-time starters or they earned a starting job later on in the season, but there are so many talented players on both sides of the ball where we could realistically see a 2015, 2016 jump.
Exactly. And I think that's why Jedd has emphasized so much it's a building year. And again, that doesn't excuse, necessarily going 5-5, 6-5 when you probably should be 7-2. That's neither here nor there. But those are all learning moments that Damon has been in, that Jonah's been in, that Decker has been, playing in the Penn State whiteout for both those guys, where I don't think Damon misses that throw in the whiteout next year. If that game is played in 25, I don't think Damon misses that throw. And that's not to say that it was like a freshman moment or anything like that. But these are all learning moments that's why Jedd wanted to play Damon in all 12 games, because he's going to be the guy next year. And so you have to get those guys reps this season, and learning from Will, much like Austin Mack learning from Penix, can only get you so far. You have to play. And from what we've seen, that's why we're so optimistic is like, look how good Damon's been this season. Has the highest completion percentage of any freshman quarterback, better than Dylan Raiola, better than, any other quarterback in this class, who's thrown, I believe, at least like 20 passes. So that I'm not counting guys that throw 3 passes, 5. That doesn't count. Guys that actually played all 11 games and, are actual contributors. And that's why everything is trending in the right direction for this program.
So I want to stay on Damon there for a second, where I'm sure that people say, oh, well, it's only, however many passes. That doesn't matter. We've seen the arm talent. We've seen what it looks like. And that's something that, is going to continue to just grow, where obviously he's not going to stay probably in the 80 to 85% wherever he is right now. Like it's not going to stay that way for a full season. But at the same point, he looks like a guy who in this offense can complete 70, 72, 73% of his passes in that range where it's high efficiency. We saw him throughout spring and fall camp be really good at protecting the football and keeping it away from defenders at the same point. So that's something that I'm really excited to see. And then something you and I talked about on the show the other day is the availability of the offense and how it has always felt like with Demond in there, it plays a little faster. There are things that just happen differently with him at the helm. And it's something where I'm really excited to see that in a full season where, when Jedd talked about it in his Monday press conference, he said, there's nothing that isn't available to Will that is available to Demond or vice versa, but I'm certainly way more prone to call certain things with Demond in there. And we've seen that all season long. We've seen, it's the read option. Yeah, it's this. It's finding ways to utilize his mobility, his athleticism. And these are things that when all these guys come back, because let's be real, I'm sure we talked about the John Milner article yesterday saying, if he comes back, if he doesn't go to the portal, from everything you and I have heard, this team is staying together. There's nothing to be concerned about on that front of, if one or two people leave here or there, that's college football. That's the way things happen. But the core of this team, everything that you'd expect from this team that is here right now in terms of the long-term building blocks that Jedd Fisch has hung his hat on, said this guy, that guy, because another guy we didn't mention, and obviously with Jonah there, it's a very different discussion, but is Adam Muhammad, where he's going to all of a sudden get a much bigger workload next season. And you look at all those guys and you say, all these guys are coming back. From everything we've heard, these guys are all going to be here and be part of what Jedd Fisch is building. So I'm really excited to just look at this on both sides of the ball throughout the rest of the bye week, throughout the offseason, because there's so much to be excited about with this team, with this roster.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not even validating the whole concept of certain guys starting or transferring because,
that's all that needs to be said, really.
Again, I'm not here to drag people. I'm just not even going to bother wasting my time on it. But it's also, that's why they had to play this year. That's why Khmori beat out Brian Parham. And it's something Wassie, we'll talk about later on, where Wassie told me, hey, Khmori beat out a senior straight up. And that was a guy where, Parham says, oh, well, I was promised and things like, well, yeah, coaches will say, hey, we'll give you the first crack. But if the guy's better than you and he's behind you and he's got 3 or 4 years of eligibility left, we're going to play him. You're not Carson Bruner. You're not Alfonso Tuputalo, who, by the way, are all over the field in their own right. So it's like you're not going to supplant either of those two guys. And so the guys that do end up transferring, because there's always going to be attrition. There's going to be guys that transfer out. But of the guys that do, I don't think anybody would be an impact guy or even in the 2Ds. I can't think of a single guy that's been in the 2 deeps this season that will transfer. So when you look at everything coming in, everything that's returning, that I think – and I think we talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it on the show or it was during, in the press box where I don't think we've seen the full offense. And you touched on it where it's like, obviously he can play more do more when Demond's in the game. But I don't think even when Demond's been in the game, we've seen the full arsenal. And I think when you have another year of Denzel, if you can get one of Andrew Marsh and Donovan Olabode, and to pair with Raiden Vinesbright and Chris Lawson and, all these guys coming in, it's like, because I know this is about, the guys returning, but it's like, it's about pairing it together. And that's what we've seen this season where it's like, hey, you can make it work with the guys you have that you inherited and also sprinkle your guys in to get the core going. And that's why when I say 10-2 next season, I know it sounds outlandish, but the more you think about it, the more realistic it is.
And if Washington goes 10-2 next season, I feel like you and I are expecting a lot of positive news on the recruiting trail as well, which we'll get to right after message from our friends over at Skylight Frames. Are you missing someone this holiday season and want them to be part of your festivities from afar? Well, we've got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds. You can add new photos straight from your phone from anywhere. It only takes a tap on your phone to send new photos to a frame across the country. It's the fastest, easiest way to keep loved ones in the loop. They'll feel so much more connected to you. The touchscreen is a game changer. You can swipe through photos, tap to see new photos sent, tap the heart button to say thank you to the sender. 2 sizes to choose from. There's the original 10-inch frame or a larger 115-inch gallery frame. They look perfect in any room, and they can stand on their own, or you can easily mount them to a wall. And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, you can get $20 off your purchase of a skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/college. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/college. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/college. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We got a fun Thursday night matchup game coming up. It's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. I like the Pittsburgh Steelers money line in this game. Plus, give me the over on interceptions thrown for Jameis Winston. There might be an anytime interception. You should go check that out. Plus, over on catches for David Njoku. Love watching that guy this season. I think Jameis really likes him. You should go check out all those parlays, just any parlays, anything like that. So much more over on FanDuel. So, Lars, jumping into the 2026 class here, there's a lot to like. Washington has 4 commits right now. We've talked about a couple over the last week or so. Terrance, Saryon, and Wassie Lugolobi both jumped in the boat, added to a class that already has Esun Tafa and CJ Wallace, who's the kicker out of California. Esun Tafa is the running back from Oregon. So this is a really strong class already when you think about just the early days. Some of these guys who have the potential to really rise a lot on the recruiting trail. We know Ansu has been moved around a little bit in the rankings. He was top 100 at the point where he committed to Washington. Still a 4-star in terms of the composite rankings. This is a guy who I love his film. He's a lot of fun to watch. But Esun Tafa is a guy who in the 2026 class, one of the top offensive linemen on the West Coast over in Utah. We talked about him the other day. That's somebody who's gotten some crystal balls to Washington. He's got a commitment date set for next Tuesday, I believe. And if he's somebody who jumps in the boat as well, we're talking about a class that could potentially be in the top 15 by the time it's all said and done.
Absolutely. And if you look at how Washington built the 25 class, it was like half a dozen for 4, 5, 6 guys. Also, you started with a running back and an offensive lineman. So now you got, running back, receiver, linebacker. So they're building it in kind of that similar way.
Right. So one thing that they did really early also was they got Dash Beerley, the quarterback, where he was in there extremely early as well. And I feel like that's the one difference in this class, though, where they're probably going to take one. That's the one difference that I'm really curious to see in 25 and 26.
Right, but I think the context there, because it's a good point, but the context there is you have a sophomore in DeMond and 2 true freshmen in Beerley and
Tristan McMillan.
Thank you. I was like, why am I blanking on the kid from Hawaii? I'm like, how are we blanking on this one? But no, so you have 2 there, plus Shaker Kendall if he sticks around. I only say if he sticks around just because that's a guy where I wouldn't fault him if he decided to leave, but you do kind of want to back up with experience. So either way, they're probably going to have a guy come in and take that spot either way, as a backup to DeMond with a veteran presence and maybe a JC guy, because otherwise that room is a sophomore and 2 true freshmen, which I love the projectability long term of that. But, and again, you never want injuries, but God forbid if DeMond were to go down, you're going from a sophomore to now 2 true freshmen. I don't think Jedd wants to do that. So, you make a good point there, but I'm not necessarily, it's no longer the Riding Lions class. It's no longer, what Washington was shooting for under Kalen DeBoer, which was some of those high 5-star guys. And it's not that Jedd can't do that, but let's be real. If you're a 5-star in this class and DeMond's only a sophomore, that's a hard sell. But that's also why you go and build up every other position. Go get a couple more 4-star offensive linemen. Get some 4-star edge rushers or defensive linemen. Go get a 4 or 5-star safety, which we'll talk about, Braden Womack. Those guys where, because you look at the safety position, by the time Womack would get on campus, I think Peyton Waters would be a junior. Broussard's gone for over a year. So at that point, those are the positions where it's almost like, go get the quarterback of defense. Go get the quarterbacks of defense, the offensive linemen of defense, and those sort of things, because you don't necessarily need a. Although I am intrigued to your point about who they end up taking at quarterback in 2026, but I don't think it's as much of a worry for me as it's more of a curiosity.
So exactly, that's where I'm with you. Where some of the positions I'm really intrigued by are running back, in the defensive backfield where you talk about Braylon Womack, RJ Sermons is a top 50 player out of Southern California. He put Washington in his top 10 on Tuesday. And I would say those are the biggest positions. And then defensive line is the other one, where in the 25 class, we've seen this coaching staff say, all right, we haven't necessarily been able to hit on some of the top guys we want. I'm curious to see if that changes in 2026, where we were like the guys they took in 25. Let's not get that twisted. We like those guys a lot, but they're long-term projectable guys where it's, hey, maybe Dominic McCone or Victor Sanchez Hernandez, whoever else. They're guys that are going to come in and probably redshirt, especially with the discussion we've had about the transfer portal and who might come in, especially on the interior of the defensive line, is those are long-term guys. And then all of a sudden, if you're able to close on, let's just say one top 100 guy on the defensive line, right? Let's just say you're able to close on one of those guys plus a couple of other mid-tier 4-star prospects and say, we're adding these guys to the room who all of a sudden we're comfortable with where these younger guys have developed to, plus we're adding this top-end talent in there. That's a defensive line that you can work with, or that's, just where you want to continue to level up to. Same thing at linebacker, where there's the one commit in Wassie Lugolobi, where you look at all three levels of the defense and I say, that's where I want to see the most in terms of recruiting, where let's say in a hypothetical world here, Washington does land Donovan Lubide and Andrew Marsh in the 25 class to close that out. Just hypothetically speaking. Yeah, that'd be amazing. I'd love that. But at the same point, like, you can look at that, and we talked about Terrance Saryon when he committed. Lars, you don't necessarily need to take another receiver. You can go out and add one because you can, because why not? You got to go out and add a tight end or two. But I look at the offensive side of the ball and say, yeah, you want to keep adding the trenches. Obviously, that's incredibly important. But I look at some of the skill positions and I say, if a guy like Brian Bonner at running back says, hey, I want to commit, you're not turning that down. But at the same point, you don't necessarily, like, that's just the example I'm making there. But at wide receiver, it's not necessarily the biggest concern. So I'd say, hey, you can allocate those resources elsewhere and really just start to stack where you want to.
I agree with that. Although the only thing that would kind of just add on to that, I don't think they're going to stop recruiting receivers because,
I agree.
Like you mentioned, like, you don't know what guy, I mean, you don't want to speak it into existence, but let's say, again, using an example here, no connection here or anything like that, just using it as an example. It's like Keith Reynolds ends up transferring. Okay, now maybe you add, or, somebody else ends up transferring. Maybe they just, whatever. It's the new age of college football. We don't like it, but it is what it is. I'm not saying these guys would transfer, but they're going to keep their eyes open in 26 and kind of just, massage that because, again, we're talking about a class that's over a year and a half away, from signing. Like, it's a long, long time. I mean, I asked Wassie Lugolobi the worst question possible to a recruit in 26. Is there anything that would make you not sign with Washington as we look at the calendar in November 2025 or 2024? Like, that's, and again, I told him it's like, and I didn't even include it in the story because, again, he's like, look, barring a coaching change, right? I got same thing with Kalen, where it's like, look, yeah, I'm down to sign with Kalen unless there's a coaching change. Then I might reconsider my options. I still might sign with Washington. And I think that's the other side of this equation. There is a brand that Washington has that Jedd is, I don't even think fully tapped into yet. And that's what speaks so highly to the 25 class is I think in 26, that with a full year, a full everything at Washington and Jedd saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going anywhere. Like everybody says, I bounce around every 2 years to a job. I'm planting my flag at Washington. Why not plant your flag with me? And I think that's going to be a major selling point. When I asked him on Monday, and he's like, well, the facility investments, all the investments that we made in football. And it's also like, well, yeah, Washington also made an investment at Jedd Fisch. He's making over $7.5 million. Going to make, I think, 7.7 next year or whatever. And so you're just looking at all the positive momentum, there's no reason why Jedd would really leave. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I guess if he wants to go to Florida, so be it. But I don't even think nobody wants that headache at this point. And Jedd can do what Kalen should have done. Make Washington your home. Now, if you want to go to the NFL, so be it. That's a different discussion. But when it comes to college jobs, I don't know where Jedd could go realistically that would be a better situation. So
I love where you're going with this. The best point that you just made, and it's something I wanted to make sure we hit on before we move on, is you said he hasn't tapped into the Washington brand, where this is just something that I know I've noticed, I know you have as well, throughout the season where Lars, every away game that Washington has gone and played has been a sellout in some way, shape, or form, plus like the one color coordination. There's the stripe out at Iowa. Obviously, you get the white out. There's the black out at Rutgers. They did the red out at Indiana, where this is still a team that's coming off a national championship. The brand is still very high. The brand recognition is still there. And that's something that, I think about the dark days of UW football, like growing up in Los Angeles in the early to mid 2000s, in the Ty Willingham days, where it's, oh, you're a Washington guy. It's like, yeah, like nobody cared. And now that's not where the program is anymore. And part of that is thanks to the national championship run. Part of that is thanks to the move to the Big Ten. You can call it whatever it is, but Jedd has done a really good job of trying to find ways to tap into that. And in year one, with all these moving pieces, with everything that just happened, I feel that he did the best that he could with that. And that's exactly to your point, moving forward into year two. Hopefully we see that big jump from, let's just say they end the season 7-5 or 7-6, after a bowl win, being 20-point underdogs this next week. We'll take that for what it is. But let's just say they end the season that way. And then all of a sudden next year it's 10-2. Let's just say that's where they are next year. All of a sudden, boom, that selling point, everything that you're looking for is there. And again, it's a discussion that you have once you get there, but these are all things that Jedd has done a really good job of in year one. And I can only imagine what year 2, 3, 4 can look like, assuming everything continues to build in the way that he says it's going. But Lars, we've talked a lot about football this week. We got to get into basketball because there's a lot to like on the basketball court, but there's a lot that really needs to improve, which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at Prize Picks, because Prize Picks is the best way to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. And Prize Picks is live in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, and so many more. And Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in place even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. You can sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. If you think Justin Jefferson is going to get more than 83.5 yards this week, or Lamar Jackson is going to pass for more than 1.5 touchdowns, you can cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is so much fun. I've had so much fun. I love the basketball side of things, but I also love some of my favorite players on my fantasy team would be Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Patrick Mahomes, some of those guys. I love using Prize Picks so much for guys like that. You can download the app today and use code LOCKDOWNCollege. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKDOWNCollege. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Lars, let's jump over to basketball because, as we said, there's a lot to like on the basketball court. Washington is 3-1. Great Osobor leads the nation in rebounds. He's pulling down 14 rebounds a game. He's also second in the nation in steals. He's been phenomenal. He had 23 and 18 against UMass Lowell. But that's not good enough because Washington is one of the worst teams in the nation in terms of shooting, whatever metric you're going to look at, field goal percentage, 3-point, free throw line. It's all in the low 300s. They are towards the bottom of the country, and that's 350 something teams. That's not pretty. You don't love to see that. And Danny Sprinkle has said as much after the UMass Lowell game. He was asked about Great Osobor's 23 and 18 against the Red Hawks on Sunday, and he was just like, it wasn't good enough. He should have had 35 and 25. He's missing layups. He's missing free throws. He's doing this, he's doing that. And Lars, to be honest, I love that in a basketball coach.
I mean, it's what we said about Sprinkle from day one, where after we had him on the podcast, especially not to, kiss up.
Here. Yeah,
no, I was saying not to kiss up, but it's just like you could sense, and this is no shot at Mike Hopkins, because I love Mike. Mike was a great guy and, a great person and all that, and he did good in the first couple of years. But you can tell Danny is an established head basketball coach. He is not going to take this thing lightly. And I think that's exactly what you want, where you go and get that investment. You use the buyout money from Kalen to go get him. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear, hey, if we're going to go spend 1.5 plus million on Great Osobor in the transfer portal to, an NIL and all those sort of things. And, I'm glad that Danny, because you could easily be like, oh, well, hey, he had a pretty good game. I had somebody else in the media. I'm not going to throw him under the bus here. Had somebody else in the media this week tell me, oh, great was fine. It was okay. And I'm like, 8 of 21 ain't cutting it, buddy. 8 of 21 ain't cutting it. Like, I don't care what the rationale is. If it's 8 of 14, okay, cool. I'm not great,
Sure.
but I'll take it. That's a lot better. But when you add on, I mean, you're almost talking about twice as many missed shots to makes in that situation. And now
Right.
I do want to clarify something, because yes, Great Osobor is obviously out of shape and not truly where he should be, and probably where he will be by the time we get to Big Ten play.
And Danny said
But
as much. Sorry, I just want to make sure that, because he said that in his press conference. He said he's out of shape. He's not where we want him to be yet.
right, but which is crazy, because how many times have you and I walked into press conferences on Monday and Tuesday and seen Great Osobor shooting free throws by himself,
Yeah.
working out by himself? So I do want to clarify, we're not saying he's like a dog in the negative sense of, man, he's dogging him, man. Like, oh my God, why did you go bring him in? But it's more or less like Danny knows how good he can be, and that's why he's holding him to a high card. Is, look, whether we're paying you whatever, look, this is your 4th year in my system, my guy. You, of all people, need to know what you're doing and need to actually execute it. And it's not that he's been bad, because, again, like you meant, leading the nation in rebounds. What do you have? 23 points right against UMass Lowell. But again, it's one of those where it's like on the heels of what he had, that Blake Griffin game when it was like the first player since Blake to have like, XX and Y or whatever.
Yeah,
And
it was points, rebounds, and steals, like 15, and five or six steals, whatever it was.
Right. And again, we love that for the PR, right? We love the agenda
100%.
pushing on that. But you also put it in the context of who it's against and how it looks. When I went to the first couple of games and I tweeted, it's like, Great just is not fully engaged. And I think that, part of it, being, sick the first couple of weeks, not being in shape and all those sort of things. It's not that he doesn't care, but I almost wonder, is he that kind of guy where I'm not, and we talked about this, I think, is he a guy that turns it on in Big Ten play when it matters? Because again, against Nevada, it wasn't great, but it wasn't, I guess, his worst performance, because his worst wasn't, yeah.
No, sorry. I think they're ramping him up for that, where he's still playing a lot. Like, it's not like they're saying, oh, we're putting him on a minutes limit, we're doing this. I think it's still getting back into the flow of things, because we had heard about this illness where it caused him to miss the media day that we had with the team. But that was all that was said. And if it was serious enough, because Danny said it was something that had, traveled throughout the team. So how long it actually kept him out, we don't know that. It could have been a little more severe where he missed a couple of weeks. Again, we don't know that. And we're not trying to speculate, but that's how serious it could have been if it's caused him to be out of shape through the first 4 games, if he's still working his way back from that. That's all I want to say on that, because I don't want to speculate, but that's just the only possible answer for that scenario. But we look at just where everything else is. I look at this team and I say, okay, there's a lot of things that I like. Dominic Diamande is going to be here in a couple of weeks. That's a guy who Lars, you and I are very high on. We think that he can really raise the ceiling of this team. And on top of that, we look at where the roster is right now, where I think DJ Davis is going to find his mark here sooner rather than later. We saw it against Seattle Pacific. He's been off for the other games he's played in, but that's something where that's the life of a shooter. It's up and it's down. And the one thing that I personally hope for when I look at this team is that the lows of shooting are just coming early on, and you find the mark. And that's something where you get into Big Ten play and all of a sudden it's getting better and it's getting better and it's getting better, which would be nice because that's exactly what you want to see. But right now it's not. And Frank Kapnong hasn't played in the last couple of games. That's something that you and I can be watching pretty closely, where the first game, Danny Sprinkle said it was load management. The second one, he said, yeah, it was a knee, but it's also still kind of because of that, where we just want to make sure that he's healthy throughout the entire season. That's something I want to watch really closely, where if that goes on for another week, 2 weeks, I'm going to get really concerned, where this is the point in the season where you can get away with that in the same vein as you can get away with Great being out of shape and missing layups and all those other little things. I'd much rather see that now than when Purdue comes to town or Illinois comes to town or UCLA. These are the times where you can get away with that. Those are not.
Exactly. Well, and it's also a matter of, yeah, I mean, Danny obviously coached him hard in the summer. He mentioned that when he came on our show. But it's also, once you, I think, get probably, let's say, say a dozen games in, the communication should be better. The slot selection should be better. These guys will know in a game situation, because again, you can only practice so much. You can play a game, you can practice against yourself all you want.
Yeah.
It really is different when you go into a game situation and Zoom Diallo sees how Lewis Courtwright plays off him and vice versa, and how, Great impacts the game as a ball handler and in the post. Wilhelm's role. There's all sorts of things. And I think, there's kind of positives and negatives to it, where it's like Danny, I think, is saying, like, look, I'm going to test my guys because obviously Frank would make a massive addition and would kind of cover up a lot of things. And if he needs to rest, so be it. Because again, you look at that knee issue that he had last season and even the season before that, it's like, okay, look, like, this is a guy we need for Big Ten play, because we saw what happened last season when Frank went out against Seattle University. Washington was not the same. Flat out was not the same. And I'm not saying he would have that impact this year, but again, he close to it, because again, Great can only do so much. I think Wilhelm played the 5, right? It was like Great to play the 5.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, Wilhelm's not a 5. So like, and there's no shot at Wilhelm, but it's just like, this is Danny basically saying, look, we can kind of experiment early in the season. I'm going to test some guys. I'm going to see how they play off each other, see how they play in certain spots, so that when we get a dozen, 15 games into the season and you're getting into Big Ten play, now you're like, okay, I don't have these questions that we have now. And the only thing that does concern me is Danny did say, like, yeah, we're going to be a streaky shooting team, especially from 3-point range. And it's like, well, streaky usually means you have a couple of good games mixed in with some bad ones, but it really feels like for the most part, aside, even to a degree against Seattle Pacific, it's not been pretty. And so that's the one exception I have.
You're right. Because I've seen one half of basketball that I feel like we can look back on and say, yeah, that's what you want to be. It was the second half against Division II Seattle Pacific. And mind you, they were down 13 points in the first half of that game. So I think you and I are still really excited about the long-term outlook of this team. Another guy that I just want to mention because I've been really impressed with him is Tyler Harris. That's a guy who has continued to get better each just game in and game out. We see him I feel we've seen a lot of improvements from him defensively, especially. And that's a guy who I'm really looking at as by the time we get into Big Ten play, if he's a full-time starter, I'm not going to be surprised, because that's just the level of value that I believe he brings on both ends of the floor. But again, right now it hasn't been pretty. I feel like we need to reserve judgment for a couple more weeks. We get to December 7th is the date I'm really looking at, because you've played a couple of Big Ten games in that point. That's after the USC game. I feel like that's when we can really look at this team and say, all right, where are you and what do you look like? Because now it's either going to be, okay, yeah, you're on the right trajectory, you're moving in the right direction, or hey, there's some major concerns here. But Lars, we're going to get there when we get there. Until then, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all every day for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And with that being said, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel for new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, up right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.